Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is set to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and European leaders in Berlin this weekend, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. At the same time, a U.S.-backed proposal for a demilitarized free economic zone in eastern Donbas is being discussed as a potential compromise in Ukraine-Russia peace talks, while Europe debates the legality and risks of using frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine's defense. We explore these developments with Rostyslav Khotin, senior editor of RFE/RL's Ukraine Service. Good to have you back on the program. Rostislav, let's begin with the latest. Steve Witkoff is in Berlin, maybe even as early as today, perhaps tomorrow, but meeting is going ahead. What are your expectations from the meeting with Witkoff? Are we any closer, anything tangible?
Yeah, the American side wants to convince Ukrainians and Europeans to accept the latest proposals, the latest so-called compromise being drafted by the American side, which is the main thorny issue is, of course, territorial question, the issue of Donbas, because Russia is insisting on Ukrainian troops to fully withdraw from the whole of Donbas region, and the Americans want to create some kind of free trade economic zone there. Russia thinks in terms of demilitarized zone, kind of Korean style demilitarized zone. We'll see. It's a very difficult issue for Ukrainians to accept this, to withdraw troops, of course, because Constitution prohibits this, and of course Ukraine will never recognize Donbas, de jure Russian, only kind of is ready to recognize de facto. But from the principal point of view, Ukrainians are strongly against Ukrainian withdrawal from the whole of Donbas. I just wanted to remind you that Russia now controls about 99% of Luhansk region and about 77% of Donetsk region. So Russia wants the total control of Donbas, both Donetsk and Luhansk region, 100%. But withdrawal will not correspond to Ukrainian national interest, especially because Ukrainians have a very fortified belt of fortresses in the Donbas between Kramatorsk and Slavyansk and Konstantinivka, and Russians are not gaining ground lately. They even can't take fully city of Pokrovsk, despite the enormous efforts for takeover of Pokrovsk for the many months, and Russia is no closer to the strategic end in the Donbas. Why Ukrainians should withdraw from Donbas if Putin can't take it militarily? Why give him a chance to take it diplomatically? That's the Ukrainian logic which is here. Also, the issue is political one for Ukrainians, because the constitution bans giving up of territories of Ukraine, the change of territorial changes. It's against the Ukrainian constitution, and Zelenskyy is in a very uneasy situation because he can't do it himself. He can't even stand trial in Ukraine later for this territorial compromise. So he wants he thinks that it only could be granted, this decision could be granted only by all Ukrainian referendum or Ukrainian election, or, that's the whole political difficulties for Zelenskyy personally, also from political point of view.
Right. And so I think it's important to remind viewers as well that, as you said, that only about some of these regions, 75% or 77% controlled by Russia. That's simply because they can't take it, right? If we look at Kramatorsk, a lot of these fortress cities with these entrenched positions, which the Russians just can't get. But I want to ask you about this proposal, and it's an interesting wording here. I mean, a demilitarized free economic zone. I mean, these words generally don't necessarily fit well together. Let's roll a clip now of Donald Trump, who's proposed this, and let's get his view, what he thinks about all this.
Tell us how this free economic zone would work in the Donbas and in land that the Russians took by force.
Well, I don't want to do that now. It's a very complex situation, but it would work, and a lot of people want to see it work. And all I want to do is I want to stop the death of 25,000 people a month.
I mean, there it was just a very brief comment to the press, but do you feel that this is something that even the Americans are convinced of working?
You know, the American thinks that they think that they have a compromise on the table, compromise deal on the table, because initially, at the initial stage of this latest peace push, the idea was that Ukrainians are withdrawing from Donbas and Russian troops are entering areas, unoccupied areas of Donbas after Ukrainian withdrawal. But Americans now insist that Russian troops will not enter areas which were kind of left, which will be left by Ukrainian troops. So that they think that is a good compromise that Ukraine could, in theory, agree. We'll see. The thing is that Russia is not thinking about in American terms. American thinks about business, about prosperity, about the industrial development, and so on and so forth for the Donbas, which was the Ukrainian industrial heartland before the war. But Russians think not in these terms of business opportunities or economic opportunities. Russians think in terms of territories, in terms of occupation, in terms of destroying Ukrainian statehood. That's the kind of misunderstanding, misleading between Washington and Moscow, because Russian thinking is a bit different than American thinking is. American thinks about opportunities, economic opportunities, but Russian thinks in terms of occupation and subordination of Ukraine. So that's one thing. Second thing, as I said, for Ukrainian constitution bars absolutely does not allow any kind of territorial compromises which are kind of giving up territories. And it's a difficult situation for Ukrainian leadership. Also, we'll see if the demilitarized zone is there, which troops will kind of monitor the peace deal there, the ceasefire in the demilitarized zone. Are these will this be Western troops? But Russia is strongly against any presence of Western troops on Ukrainian soil, even American troops. I would say that American troops is a red line. Maybe some kind of European countries, not Germany, not Britain, not France, but maybe others, smaller countries. We'll see. But for Russian side, the presence of Western troops on Ukrainian soil, it's a non-going area. It's kind of no-go area. It's unacceptable at all. It's a red line. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. There are a lot of questions. Also, the question of time, because the American administration wants this peace deal to be achieved by the Christmas, or at least the maximum by the end of this year. So Ukraine is also under pressure from the timing point of view.
Yeah, but on the timelines, I mean, this is something we've followed over the last weeks and months, quite frankly, about the Americans trying to push a timeline. It's changed. There's a deadline. Recently as well, it was supposed to be Thanksgiving. That didn't happen. Again, now we hear a Christmas timeline. So, I mean, if we keep hearing these pressure points, is this part of, as you would say, like a process that is workable on Trump's team? Is this a tactic? Is this just stalling? I mean, how much credibility does the word timeline have anymore in all this?
You know, the Trump's administration approach is kind of business-like approach. We want a clear plan. We want all sides to agree, and we want a clear timeline. Kind of, we want to time the deadline. So they are kind of thinking in business terms, like timeline and deadline. But for Ukraine, it's a difficult situation because at the same time, there is also pressure on Ukraine to hold election next year after ceasefire, after peace is achieved, some kind of peace deal is achieved. It also complicates the whole situation for the Ukrainian side. To hold election in the time of martial law, it's a difficult issue because it's against the Ukrainian constitution. So Ukrainian parliament should kind of adopt a new law, kind of allowing some kind of presidential and possibly parliamentary election in Ukraine as well. This factor is also complicates the whole peace process as well. But Americans are insisting on Ukraine to hold election in the first half of next year. We'll see. Zelenskyy is now not against election in principle for election to be held within 60 or 90 days after peace is achieved. We'll see how it goes, how it plays out in Ukraine. But so far, the situation is extremely difficult, and especially and Russia is also trying to put military pressure on Ukraine, targeting daily, every night, Ukraine with hundreds of drones, dozens of missiles. Even this night, also Ukraine was targeted in energy infrastructure. So Russia is, in addition to diplomatic pressure, puts also military pressure on Ukraine and Ukrainian population.
But at the same time, I mean, I was going to ask you, because we've seen those images just recently, I think in the last sort of 24 hours, President Zelenskyy in Kupiansk, very much there on the front line, saying this is territory of Ukraine, encouraging the troops. If we see things like that, and we have mixed reports on Pokrovsk that's still apparently under fire, still not fully taken by the Russians, how much do these images and how much is the reality on the ground, how much does that impact, let's say, sway that Ukraine has in terms of negotiations?
Ukrainians are fighting very well, actually. As we said, as we discussed, Russians have not been able to take fully control of Pokrovsk, the city of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. Kupiansk is also still under Ukrainian control in Kharkiv region. So, with the current pace of Russian advances, current pace of Russian military advances in eastern Ukraine, Russia will need 5 years to take the whole Donbas region, 5 years. With the current pace of Russian advances in the east, Russia will need more than a century to take the whole Ukraine. That shows that Russia is kind of putting a brave face, but in fact, Ukrainian resistance is quite fierce and quite successful. So Russians, they don't get any strategic advances, strategic successes, just a tactical moves, but with no victory in sight for Russians.
But in order for Ukraine to hold what it has, I mean, obviously it needs ammunition, it needs stability, financial backing. A lot of that will come from what was hoped to be use of the frozen Russian assets or some kind of loan that seemed to be stuck. Belgium was still digging its heels, and now apparently there's resistance also from Italy. Hungary, maybe no surprise, but how do you think that situation is going to be revealed? Because next week we have the European Council summit. Do you sense a breakthrough that there will be access to this kind of loan coming out of Brussels?
The issue of frozen Russian assets to be used for Ukrainian financing of Ukraine is kind of a very tough one. The European leaders will discuss this at the Brussels summit next week. The thing is that now there is already a compromise, because Belgium was strongly against, and some other countries strongly against, using this money to finance Ukrainian reconstruction, or even for the current tactical needs of Ukraine next year and the year after next year. But now there is a compromise that these Russian frozen assets will be frozen until Russia pays Ukrainian reparations and rebuilds Ukraine financially. So the good thing is that this money will not be released in any near future for Russia. It will be frozen until the end of the war, until the peace comes to Ukraine. So it's already a good sign, but there are still resistance for using this money for Ukrainian needs. There is still resistance from several European countries. Belgium, of course, where the clearing Euroclear is located, where more than 200 billion euros of Russian assets are frozen. And some other countries have joined Belgium, like Italy, Hungary, Slovakia. We'll see. But the issue will be discussed in Brussels. Hopefully the compromise will be found, because Ukraine badly needs financing for the 2026 and 2027.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, with that, we know that there's a lot of things going on at multiple fronts with these also negotiations, these meetings in Berlin this weekend. It's going to be critical, and we'll see how it all plays out. As we know, many things all at once. It's a dynamic situation. But look, thanks for joining us here. Always a pleasure giving us the latest. That was Rostyslav Khotin there from the RFERL's Ukrainian Service. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks here on TVP World. But stay tuned for more news and commentary. So don't go away. Goodbye.